1972, Ngā Tamatoa and Victoria University's Reo Māori Society took the Māori language petition to Parliament.
They initiated a petition and collected over 30,000 signatures asking for Māori language to be recognised in our primary and secondary schools.
When I was going to school, I could study French, I could study German, I could study Latin, but I could not do Māori at any stage in school. It was not being offered.
Is that you?
Oh, my auntie taught me this mihi, but a funny thing happened to me. I can't really explain it other than the reo just came out of me.
This understanding of Māori people is something that the Pākehā has neglected and something that needs to be looked at. I think that the key to it is the language.
What? It's ridiculous.
Oh, it's actually how we spoke too.
Just as we made concessions for my grandmother's pidgin English, today my mokopuna make allowances and reluctantly speak English to me.
For me, it was pretty simple. The focus of my parents was to give us a Pākehā education and to learn te reo Pākehā, because they saw that as the way for us to progress in the modern world. And so it was a conscious decision for them, just as it's a conscious decision for you to give your kids te reo Māori.
One of the myths about the language was that all of these native speakers were the biggest advocates. In fact, the biggest advocates for the change were Māori who couldn't speak Māori.
Finally, te reo Māori made it into schools, but there were only a handful to teach it.
I was put into classes to teach the Māori language when I'd lost the language myself and was in recovery mode and hadn't been taught how to teach the language. That's how bad it was.
Then a decade after the petition, the first kohanga reo opened.
Initially, they were established by kuia and koro who spoke Māori to their mokopuna. And that movement caught on like wildfire to the point where we had 800 kohanga reo throughout New Zealand.
But now, kohanga reo has taken a case to the Waitangi Tribunal over policy changes that threaten the movement's existence.
They demanded that anyone teaches in a early childhood system has to have a qualification. And of course, a lot of the people in the kohanga reo didn't have a qualification. Now, the result of that is that kohanga reo have declined from 800 down to 400. So what was a hopeful saviour of the Māori language has been constrained by the state limiting its production.
The next step was to hear te reo Māori on the airwaves. The first Māori radio station started in 1987, but there are still few Māori broadcasters offering a Māori perspective on mainstream.
We advocate a Māori position, but, you know, Tamiiti goes to jail and 80% of the talkback callers think it's great. There's still not enough Māori in prime positions to substantially change New Zealand opinions.
Māori television beaming into New Zealand homes today even before the sun.
One of the arguments for television was that when you're looking at this mass media which enters every household in the country, it paints a picture that the only world is a Pākehā world, only white people. Brown people, they don't rate. And that's the message little children get from TV. And that's what Māori television does for them. It's now good to be Māori.
Larry Parr was a founding member of Ngā Tamatoa. Now he's the television manager at Te Māngai Pāho, the Māori Broadcasting Funding Agency.
So do you think Hannah's petition played a role in the birth of Māori TV, for example?
I think it was a milestone along the journey. I took copies of the petition home and put them on the bar. Dad managed a club, a chartered club in Raitihi, and And I talked to Dad and he said, oh yeah, I'll get the guys to sign them when they come in. And people were happily signing the petition, you know, and then the local cop came in. And what the hell's this, you know? Oh, there's a bunch of radical, you know, they're dangerous, da, 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 da. And Dad took the petition off, wouldn't put it back on the bar, you know? and I thought, oh man, I was pretty disappointed, you know, that he had chosen to take the side of the local cop.
But despite the gains since then, there's more work to be done.
You get deluded into thinking we're making good progress. Just imagine the impact if every iwi said, okay, from this point onwards, we will only communicate with the Crown in Te Reo Māori.
Now my own whānau, Boyd and Janine, are part of the new generation keeping our language alive. They run a Kāinga Ko Rero Rero program in Auckland to help whānau use Te Reo Māori.
It's really about us supporting other whānau like us that are trying to raise their tamariki in the reo and giving them resources and just support, one-on-one support.
So it's all rosy now with Te Reo? We can tick that one off the list?
Hell no. We've been on a waiting list at One Puna for 15 months since we moved into this little area. And I just feel like that's our right as Māori. We should be able to access those things, quality reo education for our tamariki, wherever we're living.
The demand for quality total immersion schooling far outweighs what's provided in many centres throughout New Zealand. It's 40 years since we delivered the petition to Parliament. There have been some gains, but a United Nations study found that Te Reo Māori remains at severe risk of becoming extinct. Only 1 in 4 of us can speak Māori, and that's not good enough. I struggle to understand why it's still not compulsory in schools.
Words like compulsory scare people, but that's what needs to happen. And what will come back to the country will be so enriching. And what my dream still is of living in a land where all of us have got at least 2 languages. And those 2 languages are English and Māori.
You know, Parliament was the scene of another big Ngā Tamatoa protest. Tamaiti and I camped out in a tent here in 1972. The Māori embassy demanded Māori control of Māori things.
The Land March aimed to halt the loss of Māori land. By confiscation, legislation and sale, Māori had largely become tenants in their own country, with just 5% of land remaining in Māori hands.
I know it embarrasses the government to think for the first time in history that the Maori ever marched to Parliament.
Dame Whina Cooper led the Land March, but I'm proud to say Ngā Tamatoa and the Polynesian Panthers were among the main behind-the-scenes organisers.
We were both involved in there, along with a lot of other organisations, but my role there was to set up the 26 maraes throughout the motu for the people.
The march grew from 50 people at Te Hāpua to 5,000 when it reached Wellington.
The important thing is that the natives are daring at last to stand up and protest.
People had in common that they had lost their land by various devious legislative means, and so they were prepared to march.
Marching is the most dignified manner in drawing attention to the general public of just what problems the Māori people have been facing towards retention of our land, that many of us have been raised off the land. We are unable to get loans to build on our properties.
Te Ata Witihira travelled up from Wellington to take part.
We met it at Te Kao, the first marae that they were going to be on, and we came all the way back to Wellington. It took us a month.
We've given up work. Many of the people on the march, some have thrown their jobs in, others have been sacked just to participate.
It was our group that sort of would kick off every morning to get the land march going. And so by showing a disciplined approach to dealing with some of the infractions that occurred on the land march, including, you know, physically throwing people out of the land march.
So far the committee has decided to send one bloke home, and any more nonsense, particularly on marae etiquette, it'll be home skis straight away.
They realised that we were a group that weren't prepared to broach any sort of nonsense.
Now, the rural people are quite apolitical, but they were prepared to host them. And so at night, after a meal, they would go into the house. Now, say, tell us, why are you marching? And so en route, they were politicising people as they went, and more people joined the march. But I watched them coming across the bridge, and it really was quite an impressive sight. And you could see the bridge swaying as they marched. People were quite scared. They felt it was the mana of their ancestors being displayed.
I remember when we got to Porerua and Whina Cooper, she got up and she said, "We've been sucking the Pākehā lolly too long. If we don't get a satisfactory answer when we get to Parliament, we will stay there." And everybody said, "Ai, tautoko." Well, we get to Parliament, the politicians do their welcome, and then they have tamanako Māori air, and then thank you very much for coming. And then we're expected to depart. Well, we looked at ourselves, we thought, crikey, what did we gain from that? And so you could say Ngā Tamatoa decided to stay on. I think they left us there for about 6 weeks before they decided to move in and move us off.
It wasn't the first time Ngā Tamatoa had occupied Parliament's front lawn. Tūhoe Nation, home of Tamiiti. In 1972, he set up a tent embassy at Parliament. I was in Wellington at drama school, but acting soon gave way to activism, and I spent months with Tami camped outside Parliament.
The brothers and sisters over in Australia, they had a tent embassy. Preachers over in Australia said, "Oh, that's what we got to do." And we do the same thing because we feel like treated like foreigners in our own country. I went over to Waikato to see my biological father because I really didn't know much about him. In that process, I asked him, "Oh, have you got a pup tent?" And he said, "Yep. Can I borrow it?" "Oh, yeah. Don't forget to bring it back."
That's me lying on the mattress. Yeah. My mother wouldn't have been happy with that.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm very proud that I've slept on the steps of Parliament.
That's not a practice that they encourage or condone these days.
It was a cold windy afternoon. I was a bit my-weeby and so I put the pup tent and everybody looking to see what the hell this fella's up to. And then I put my tent, I went for sleep for afternoon nap. And then I hear this voice say, "Hello, is anybody in there?" And I said, "Oh, well, get there." So I pulled the zip down and I looked, there was the old constable from the Parliament House and, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" "I'm the Māori ambassador," and 2 hours later, the police arrived, big, huge group, they just bullied me and arrested me and charged me for trespass. And the next minute I was locked up.
Charged and released, Tami went straight back to Parliament. Our focus was the 1972 elections. Our catch cry, Māori control of Māori things.
So the question is, why not Māori control of Māori things?
There is no law set down to say that a Māori can't get to the top. The reason that you haven't got a Māori as Minister of Māori Affairs is because we haven't got a Māori in the National Party.
Patu Power came as a response to the international black power. We even tried to develop an equivalent to the raised fist symbol of black power that never took off because it was silly. But we used the 3 fingers that were of classical carving.
Oh, right.
And so we tried to do that, but it looked like a W and it looked like so.
Yeah. Oh,
we gave up on it.
We were young, and despite the serious kaupapa, we let our hair down now and then.
Other than mainly just drinking parties and women.
Yeah.
It's not crazy. What you laughing for?
A lot of women.
Warming up, warming up.
40 years on, Tame is still making headlines. I wanted to ask him kanohiki te kanohi about the notorious 2007 police terrorism raids and the talk of paramilitary activity. Are you a terrorist?
No. I never have, and never will. But we have been terrorised. Tūhoe has been terrorised in the 1860s. Taranaki, Waikato. In fact, the whole country been terrorised.
You remember how Tamatoa evoked a lot of fear?
Yeah, and I think the fear is a typical of the people in power to create that. And as long as there is division among ourselves, we were just loud noise, really. I mean, we're no threat.
Yeah, well, this is my first time in this area, looking up at the uruweras. It's nice to be able to share it with you too.
Yeah, we too were very passionate about that. All we want is a recognition of that and respect of that, and the return of the uruwera.
From my kōrero with Tame, I find the activist evolving into a community leader and kaumātua.
We can only do so much, and we're not superheroes. Kia kaha ara ki te arataki i te huarahi, pai morata, tiro whānui, kawe e noho puka and don't remain to be the victim. And so we just need to move on, paint a new picture.
Choice one, bro. Yeah, good to see you, everyone.
Ngai Tūhoe want the Uruwera National Park back, but they also want Te Manumotuhake o Tūhoe, pretty much Māori control of Māori things, exactly what we were asking for at the Tent Embassy.
So Mana Motuhake is not a protest movement. It's not an application for benefit and special treatment. Rather, Mana Motuhake is about us taking responsibility and obligation for our futures.
However, when other ears hear that around the country, what they hear is those Tūhoe people want to form their own nation inside our nation, and they view it as separatist.
Mana Motuhake is not separatism. It can't be. We can't afford our own airport and our own hospital. We quite like the ones that we've been using for the last few years. And I think the majority of Tūhoe people want to bring to a conclusion a violent and a non-productive relationship with the Crown for something different.
I enjoyed my first trip to Tūhoe country, and it's interesting to see that while Ngā Tamatoa demanded Māori control of Māori things, there's been a shift, and today we talk more about iwi control of iwi things.
We've known it's going to take time, and we're prepared to hang in there. Ka whawhai tonu mātou ake.
An insulting haka similar to this one sparked the final battle for Ngā Tamatoa. The haka they took offence to was an Auckland University engineering students' annual prank. Some members of Ngā Tamatoa decided it had to stop.
When I was a young student at St Peter's Māori College in the 1940s, I was in Queen Street and I saw this parade going up, a student capping parade, and it was good fun. And there were these young Pākehā guys dressed up in grass skirts and jumping up and cavorting and doing the haka. I thought nothing of it. You know, if they like to make themselves look stupid, that's fine. But the performance had become more sexist over the years, more lurid. They were painting slogans that were sexually offensive, even painting penises on their bodies.
In 1979, the president of the Auckland University Students' Association wrote in Crackham of the many unsuccessful efforts to get the engineers to stop the stunt.
When it was begun 25 years ago, Māori students protested. Protests continued since. This year, the Māori Club asked them to abandon it, but they refused.
There's a lovely photo of Hilda all by herself, remonstrating with all of these Pākehās that were wearing these tin helmets and dark glasses and filthy slogans and Pacific Island skirts and boots, and they've been drinking and they're doing this real shit-house version of the haka, and she was all by herself trying to stop them.
The real cultural collision between the dynamic of Māori revivalism and Pākehā conservatism, where the engineers are going to be your future managers and leaders of the system.
It's the night before he taua, and she was actually crying. And Hilda never cries, so when she told me that the Māori Club didn't want to do anything about it, because they were scared they might lose the marae if they made a fuss, I just jumped in my car, rounded up a few people from Ponsonby, shot out to Otara. I said, be at my place in Ponsonby tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. The plan was, of course, that Hilda had written out the script. She would go in and read it all out to them. We'd all stand around so they knew how serious we were. Then they'd hand us over all of the grass skirts and then we'd leave. Unfortunately, when we got there, Hilda wasn't the first one into the room. 14 of us actually got in the room. So 10 men, 4 women, and there was 51 of them. Clean them up in about 3 or 4 minutes. Got all the skirts off them, left them severely damaged.
And all hell broke loose in the press, this gang invasion of the hallowed precinct.